quite nice to be relaxed out here in the open air. Beautiful scenery. We're on holiday. What year are we? I don't know what year we are. 2019. God, well, it takes me back a bit to my first holiday during the war. I mean, as a Brightonian, my mother had been left on her own with 2 small children because my father had been called up into the war. I suppose she was feeling very lonely. And so she decided, what the devil, a little man like Hitler's not going to stop me from having my holiday. So she usually used to take us up to London to my father's relatives. So that's what she decided to do. In those days you got about 4 posts, so she quickly sent a letter off to my aunt saying that she decided to come up after all, packed us all up and off we went on a little chuff puffer train all the way up to London, which was quite an adventure in those days. Right, we got there, greeted by my father's family, my aunt and my uncle and my cousin, and what happened, she said, oh, we won't be sleeping in the beds because I'm afraid, this is 1940 and Hitler has decided to bomb us each night. So we have to sleep down the Anderson shelter. Now, do you want to know the size of an Anderson shelter? Because I'll have to look at my notes, which I can't see because the sun's in the way. Now, an Anderson shelter, you know, was built into the ground because it was safe that way, or safer, and it was a little sort of cubicle in the ground with the corrugated sheets above, and then they used to put earth on top of that and grow their vegetables on it. And really, they used to grow quite fine vegetables up there. It was 1.4 metres wide. I don't know what is that in English. 3 feet, 4 feet. About 4'6" wide, I suppose. I think it was about 6 foot long, just over, which meant you could get beds in it, but tiny little bunk beds. And I can always remember when I went down through the door, there were these 2 bunk beds on the right and some chairs, about 3 or 4 chairs down the left of it for people to sit in. But the children were put into the bunk beds, and that was my brother, who was only about 2, and my cousin, young cousin, who was only about the same age, about 2.5 years. They were put up there. I was allowed to sleep on the bottom one, with an adult coming in every so often. I think they took turns to sleep down there. And that's how we had to spend the night. So after a meal, we all got our bedding together, and down we went as soon as the siren went, and it seemed to go 9 o'clock every night. Hitler was very regular with his Luftwaffe. So over he came at 9 o'clock, and we used to be ready to get down there. Big sort of door was wedged in, so there was no air down there. Very little light, because we were reliant on torches, and you couldn't get batteries in those days, so you had to use that very, very, very carefully. Me, my little brother, my little cousin, so that was 3 children. There was my mother, my aunt, 2 people from upstairs and their daughter with a baby. And that's where we all spent the night, shut in with no air coming in, because we couldn't let any light out, obviously. And my uncle, who lived with us, or lived with them, couldn't come because he was doing night things like ARP to sort of put out any bombs that might fall, incendiary bombs, the fire bombs. And so that's how we spent our night. There was no radio. I can't remember a radio down there. And as I say, the light, we didn't even burn candles because there was very little air down there. So we just had to keep going and put up. Mind over matter sort of thing. Well, I was 8 years old when I was on this holiday, the holiday of a lifetime. And I thought, what a holiday to come on. Normally you'd enjoy yourself on holidays. You don't expect to go and be bombed every night or spend your night down the Anderson shelter. As an 8-year-old, I didn't know any different really. I was annoyed because my father was away and I did miss him, so my mother must have missed him even more. And it was funny not sort of having him coming home every night. I know when I got to London I thought the barrage balloons were a fantastic sight because I hadn't seen barrage balloons before, and they were used to protect all the big buildings in London, the important buildings like Tower of London and the Parliament and that sort of thing. But our first night, well, I suppose it was miserable for me. I don't know about the adults. Adults probably found it much worse because they knew a different life, didn't they? And a baby there as well, which had to be seen to. And I suppose the adults must have chatted and I must have just drifted into sleep. Don't remember my brother and my cousin being any disturbance at all. I think they must have gone to sleep. And so I think we had a kettle down there, or made some hot drinks or flask, and a little bit to eat. And I can't remember much more about that until the final night we were there, which was about 3 weeks later, every night down the shelter. It really was bad. We came out in the morning, blinking with their blurred little eyes, and we saw this red glow in the sky. Good Lord, what a fantastic sunrise. And then we could smell all the smouldering smoke, and we thought, well, what's happened, you know? And then we realised the glow in the sky was London burning. Sorry, that always gets me. Because you thought, well, what's happened to all those people? But it would have been the East End of London at that time, and that's where the docks were. But people lived there as well. God knows how many people were killed each night. Well, during the day, my mother said, well, that's it, we're still going out. So we used to jump on a bus and go as far as our money would take us on the bus. But I can remember it being stopped every so often because there was another siren in the day. So the bus would stop, he wouldn't continue. He used to say, all out and jump into that house there. It was a stranger's house. He said, you'll find the door open, I expect. Everybody left their doors open. And in we went. And nobody seemed to complain. Nobody seemed to be surprised. And we used to huddle loads of strangers, a busload of strangers, in this little house in the corridor until the all clear went, and then we'd get out, get on the bus and continue our journey to wherever we were going, which seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Or if we went into a big store in London, we ended up in the basement if any sirens went, because they'd open up the basement and push all the customers in. And then we'd all start singing, I can remember that. I never went down the underground, so I can't tell you what it was like down there, but you've all seen pictures of the underground and what happened. We never had to sleep down there, thank God. After that night that we came out and the sky was red, my mother said, I've had enough, I'm going home today. And I thought, whew, thank God. We packed up and home we came. And I thought, well, that was a very memorable holiday, actually. We had a letter from my aunt the next day, or a couple of days later, to say that the shelter next door had received a direct hit. Those people were killed. But because we had gone home, she'd gone to spend the time with her sister, who was a few streets away, and the people who upstairs said, well, we're not going to stay here on our own, and they'd gone off somewhere else, and so they were spared. But the shelter was very badly damaged that we had been sheltering in. But coming home, it was a bit better in Brighton. We had the occasional bombs, occasional sirens, and I think, as you know from my last video, that we were close to one of the bombs on the viaduct. But Brighton, well, people just went on. You went on with your job, you went on with your schooling. Everything had to be normal. The only thing was different was the rations you had. But I never starved, not during the war, never starved. And I couldn't be faddy, I had to eat everything up. Well, children today, be thankful for what you've got, enjoy it, but respect it and respect other people as well.